Hey everyone, and welcome to the first in a new series, Return of the Primarchs, Game Mechanics. This is one I've been mulling over for quite some time. Yes, I know, it's another Primarch theory series, but firstly, this one is framed around game mechanics. Secondly, this is my series, so it'll probably be different than the others out there. And thirdly, Primarchs are always a fun time. Before we get going, I want to mention that the mechanics theorized in this series are going to be tempered in realism, meaning my intention behind these theories is not to power scale these Primarchs like a child playing pretend, but rather to use the resources currently in 40k to accurately frame these returning lords to a level that feels right. So even if you don't like the particular details of an ability, I think you should still be able to understand the logic and flavor behind them. The result should feel like an educated prediction, with a splash of fun theory. So you might be wondering, how do we begin going about doing this? Well, for starters, we currently have 3 Primarchs already in the game, and using their datasheets as a starting platform, combined with faction references, codex knowledge, events from the heresy, and the circumstances of their return, we should be able to create a fun balanced result, which can support a unique quirk. When it comes to quirks, what I'm talking about here is how all the factors of a unit come together to determine their role/niche within the game. Simply, each Primarch must be their own unique individual. These are not captains or even chapter masters. These are the Primarchs, the fathers of each legion, and should be the epitome of their chapter/legion's theme, essence, style of warfare. You get the idea. To better frame where we're going, let's take a look at the current Primarchs in 8th edition, and what I am referring to by quirks. Magnus the Red. He is the Psychic Primarch. He can bend the warp to his will to effectively nullify perils. His smite is twice as strong as your average Psyker. He buffs nearby friendly Psykers. He has a 2+ to his own Psychic test and Deny the Witch tests, has access to 3 different Psychic disciplines, and he has one of the highest Psychic profiles in the game, being able to cast and deny 3 powers, giving him dominance over the Psychic phase. Robute Guilliman, the Tactician Primarch. All of the Primarchs were warlords during the Great Crusade, leading their legions in countless battles across the galaxy. And while it's easy to imagine these mythic heroes leading the charge, Guilliman would prefer a more logic-driven position. He operates in a similar manner to that of a captain or chapter master of the Codex Astarius, because he's the author of the Codex. He wrote the book, and he's the best in the role, rerolling all failed hits and wounds for nearby Ultramarines, providing additional command points, and his role of Lord Commander of the Imperium offers buffs to all friendly Imperium units. Mortarion, the Plague Reaper Primarch. Now, while I know it's not the best descriptor, to me it makes reference to his melee prowess and his powerful area of effect abilities. Boasting an incredible combat ability with his Scythe Silence, he can execute 6 powerful strikes, or 18 weaker ones, which are really not that weak because each strike is more than capable of slaying a Marine outright. His pistol, the Lantern, is no slouch either, capable of hitting multiple units he can draw a line through within 18 inches. All of that together, he excels when in close proximity to his foes. This is made better by his abilities. As a Demon Primarch of Nurgle, his toxic presence forces nearby enemies to subtract their toughness by 1, making him even more effective in combat. And he can deal mortal wounds to nearby enemies just for being near them. Reviewing the Primarchs that exist so far, we got our Psychic, Tactician, and Plague Reaper Primarchs. Now let's theorize the mechanics of the Lion. As the Loyalist non-demon Primarch, we have Robute Guilliman as our point of reference. I can see the Lion stats being not too different from that of his brothers. Movement of 8 inches, a weapon and ballistic skill of 2+ are a guarantee. Like Guilliman, his strength and toughness of 6 feel appropriate. To lower it would be putting him on the level of a Custodian, and to raise it beyond 6 would begin to encroach on Demon Primarch territory. I feel wounds should be the same at 9, keeping him untargetable. Loyalist Primarchs are slower and have far fewer wounds than their demonic brethren. However, a key difference between him and Guilliman would be that the Lion should be incentivized to lead from the front. Full aggro. The Lion is known for his combat abilities. He's often referred to with monikers such as the Duelist, which is why, when it comes to attacks, I think we should get our first area of difference. He should have 7. Similar to Guilliman, he should have a leadership value of 10 and a 2-up armor save, both of which are pretty much a guarantee for any Primarch. Let's talk war gear. We can circle back to war gear abilities when we get to the abilities section. So how best to determine potential war gear? Let's look at Robute Guilliman, not the Lord Commander of the Imperium, but rather the Guilliman of 10,000 years ago. We can see he's armed with the Hand of Dominion, a custom power fist, and a unique power sword. Now looking at Guilliman present day, armed with the Hand of Dominion, albeit a little souped up, and the Emperor's sword. From this example, we can see the 40k version of Guilliman wields weaponry of his preference, either modified by the change of times, seen with his Power Fist, or he uses weaponry that symbolize his new role, via the Emperor's Sword. In fact, the same is true of the demonic Primarchs as well. While this is interesting and a very good indicator of the direction we can take, I don't think we can rely on this metric, since the Lion doesn't have a proper 30k model. But there is another metric we can use. Looking back at our two Guilliman's example, let's add in the Chapter Master of the Ultramarines, Marneus Calgar. As a Chapter Master, he's the closest thing we can rely on as an exemplar of the Ultramarines, aside from Rebute himself. And war gear wise, we can see he also likes Power Fists, and has a Relic Blade. You can see a thematic through line between the three models. Adapting this methodology, let's look at the Dark Angel's Chapter Master, Azrael. Essentially, Azrael wields a unique power sword and mastercrafted combi plasma. As far as this relates to Lionel Johnson, this is pretty fitting given what we know about him from stories from the Black Library. The Dark Angels originate from a world of knights, and they are a chapter which are known for using power swords as well as plasma weaponry. During the Crusade/Heresy, the Lion wielded the Lion Sword, which is now rumored to be carried by Cypher. Given the circumstances of his return, it's not unreasonable to imagine him reacquiring his sword, thematically representing the Dark Angels and the Lion himself becoming whole again. Whether or not this happens is anyone's guess. Regardless of if he gets it back or not, he should definitely wield a unique power sword type weapon, and it should be comparable to the Emperor's Sword, as the Lion requires a proper tool for the quirk I have in mind. We will give it a fair stat line of Strength +2, AP -3, and 3 damage. With regards to ranged weaponry, as a close combat expert, I imagine the Lion would prefer a relic plasma pistol, as would be fitting of the Dark Angel's Primarch. Perhaps something Call could cook up, as he also provided Guilliman some war gear back when he returned. I will suggest a stat line similar to range 12, pistol 1, strength 8, AP -3, 2 damage. Essentially, Cypher's plasma pistol. But I think the Lion should be able to overcharge, bringing it to strength 9, -3, 3 damage, causing 1 mortal wound to himself on hit rolls of 1. Beyond the default, and They Shall Know No Fear and Grim Resolve, and weapon abilities, we can look to other Primarchs as a frame to structure our abilities. In his 40k form, Guilliman possesses 4 unique abilities, as does Magnus, and while Morty does have 5, he effectively still has 4. Both Magnus and Guilliman's auras have 2 effects, and for whatever reason, Mortarion's Primarch of the Deathguard ability is only a reroll hit rolls of 1, and Toxic Presence, the secondary aspect of his aura, is a separate ability. That being said, it's logical to assume all Primarchs will have around 4 abilities. Looking at Guilliman, he has Armor of Fate, Author of the Codex, Master of Battle, and the 13th Primarch. So now we have a foundation. From here, the easiest place to start would be the first Primarch. Like all his brothers, the initial part of this ability would be a 6-inch aura that would allow Dark Angel's units within it to reroll failed hit rolls. The second part of it would be to allow him in the Psychic phase to enable a friendly unit nearby to move again in exchange for not casting any abilities. I like this for 2 main reasons. The first being that both the Lion and Rebute are known for being great strategists, and this allows for that quality to be reflected in a way that is just as powerful but different from Guilliman. And the second being, the Move Again type of ability currently isn't available to any of the Adeptus Astartes factions, which would allow the Lion to bring a strategic option, which is totally unique. For the next 3 abilities, I would like to cross-reference Marneus Calgar and Azrael back in. Looking at Marneus' abilities, we have Armor of Antilochus, Master Tactician, Chapter Master, and Teleport Strike. In addition to his war gear, you can also see a common through line with his ability set compared to Rebute's. So let's take a look at Azrael's abilities to help inform the Lion's. We know the Lion is a Master Tactician, seeing himself suitable for the role of War Master, and he is one of the only Primarchs who Guilliman looked to as an older brother. Taking all of that into account, on top of the common threads of Calgar to Guilliman and Azrael to the Lion, I think it's safe to imagine that the Lion would also have an ability like Master of War, which would be similar to Guilliman's, providing you 3 CP if he is your warlord. Alright, 2 down, 2 to go. Following suit with his brothers, his next ability would be revolving around his invulnerable save, and just like they possess, his would also have a secondary ability built in. Let's call it Heart of the Lion. Looking at Azrael's Lion Helm ability, it would make sense Heart of the Lion would give a 4-up invulnerable save, but I didn't just call it Heart of the Lion because it sounds cooler than Armor of the Lion. This ability is not just in reference to his armor, but also his spirit. This seems as good a time as any to bring up my proposed quirk for the Lion. But first, a bit of backstory. The Lion spent the first 10 odd years of his life living ferally in the forest of Caliban. which were riddled with warp-tainted beasts. After being discovered and joining the Knightly Order of Caliban, he spent the rest of his time leading crusades, hunting and purging these creatures. And despite all that exposure to Chaos Taint, he remains loyal during the Heresy. This origin of slaying monsters, joining a group of knights called the Order, literally the opposite of Chaos, it all points to his quirk being the demon-slaying melee specialist Primarch, or, which I would classify as, a Crusader Primarch. The secondary perk of this ability will be something to align with this aspect of his character. To me, something like a 3-up ignore wounds caused in the psychic phase feels appropriate. I know a 3-up ignore wounds caused in the psychic phase is pretty aggressive, but since the line seems to have a natural disposition to resist warp energies, and that mortal wounds caused in the psychic phase auto hit and wound, I think it's pretty fair. So now we get to his last ability, and if you compare what we got so far to Guilliman, you might have noticed that he's currently less survivable than Guilliman, since Guilliman has a 3-up invuln save plus a resurrection ability. Well, that is where this last ability comes into play, the Duelist, which will improve his invulnerable save to 3+ when in combat, similar to another great combat specialist in the game. But, in addition, whenever the Lion successfully makes a save using this ability, he immediately makes an attack on the target. And I want to be specific with the wording because a lot of people get confused by the way the Ancient's Banner ability works. He will make this attack before resolving the attacker's next attack. Essentially, as one of the best duelists of the Primarchs, and having a nearly supernatural sense of perception while in combat, the Lion should be able to parry and land counter strikes. The results are that the Duelist ability would not only improve his invulnerable save in combat, but also help mitigate damage received as well. Lastly, regarding war gear abilities, as I mentioned, his pistol should have the standard overcharge penalty, where characters receive 1 mortal wound on hit rolls of 1, but his sword, however, should have the ability, if the target has the demonic keyword, they cannot take invulnerable saves against attacks made by this weapon. Not only is this implied in the novelization, but it also befits his origin story on Caliban, and supports his quirk. And there we have it, brandishing a stat line similar to his brother, and armed with an Artificer-grade plasma pistol, a demon-slaying sword, abilities that give reroll to hit to any Dark Angel nearby, 1 free move in the psychic phase, 3 CP if use your Warlord, a 4-up invuln, which becomes a 3-up in combat, which generates an extra attack if successful, and a 3-up feel no pain to mortal wounds caused in the psychic phase, we get a Loyalist Primarch who is a combat specialist and is incentivized to lead from the front and purge demons, as would be fitting the Knights of Caliban. I noticed there was a small group of people looking for fan-created rules for Primarchs for use in 40k 8th edition, so I compiled all of these rules from this video into a datasheet for those interested. You can find the link to that datasheet in the description below this video. And that's a wrap on this first one. And wow, is it longer than I thought it would be. Well, if you liked this video, give it a like, and if you want to help my channel grow, give it a subscribe. It makes all the difference. Also, I'm curious to hear what you think of these proposed mechanics for the Lion's return to 40k. What kind of theories do you guys have of his return? I definitely had fun theorizing all this, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm not sure which Primarch to tackle next, so if you have any recommendations, leave a comment in this video and I'll use that to direct the order in which I continue this series. Until next time, happy wargaming.